18,000 members. I do believe we did tip the thing with that submission on natural medicine. They got over 12,000 submissions. Once Gail pushed that on MCUA...
Yep.
We got
nearly
So you can even use it for a forum occasionally on other issues that are related, like on the natural medicine thing. Yep. And Gail pushed it, and they end up getting over 12,000 submissions saying, please let us have natural medicine to the Medical Board of Australia. So I'd give them a round of applause just for that. And it's got nothing to even do with cannabis, apart from that it's a herbal medicine.
And we had the Queensland Medical Cannabis Bill repealed.
Yes, you did. Another round of applause. Yep. So basically, they're just really staunch supporters, and she's here to tell you a bit about what they do. And so a big thank you for the work she's done to date. It's been a long journey. The last 5. I mean, these hippies have been doing it for nearly 40 years, but it's been a long journey for most of us the last about 5 years or so. And but we're still fighting, and Deb's still fighting too.
There you go. Thank you, my dear.
I shall take my laptop. Thank you. See you in 3 months.
3 months, eh? It's not far away.
No.
Hi, everyone. Were you all here yesterday, or we've got some new faces today? Who was here yesterday?
Who's new?
Well, I don't want to bore you with the same thing all over again. So basically, the MCUA is the Medical Cannabis Users Association of Australia. The group started on Facebook in 2014. Gail Hester, you heard Dr. Deb mention Gail earlier. Gail Hester started the MCUA after she lost her own daughter to cancer. This was prior to finding out herself about cannabis oil. It was several years after Sarah died that Gail heard about another man who cured his own stage 4 cancer, who had the same cancer as her daughter, and she didn't want anyone else to go through those issues without having the knowledge available to them, because, as I said, at the time she didn't even know about cannabis oil. So Sarah died as far from being comfortable as anyone could get at 21. Not long after that, I joined the MCUA. I stumbled across it by accident. One day. I'd been using smoked cannabis for about 20, maybe 30 years at that stage. I had a spinal injury in 1988 and had to have spinal surgery and corrective surgery. And the painkillers weren't working, the anti-inflammatories weren't working. They had me taking Rohypnol. Who knows what Rohypnol is? Roofies, date rape drugs, that's what they had me on at night time to sleep. So I've actually lost about 5 years of my memories from my children growing up. I had them say to me, you remember when this happened, Mum? And I go, no, sorry, that's gone. But anyway, someone suggested, because the painkillers and the anti-inflammatories weren't working, someone suggested that I smoke weed. And I thought, are you kidding? I'd never smoked weed in my life. I was nearly 30. And so I tried it, and I found out straight away that it helped with the muscle spasms and the pain levels. I also found that if I used too much of it, I went to sleep. So I was able to wean off the Rohypnol over a couple of weeks without any withdrawal symptoms. So the MCUA started off, we're a patient-based group. All of our members can contribute their own personal stories, and we exchange our experiences, and we've learnt that way. We also trying to put up as much accurate, peer-reviewed information as we can, so that people do have the correct information. We also lobby government, we try and pester the politicians as much as we can. But the bottom line is, we can't do it on our own. We need everyone out there who needs this, not just to contact their state and federal politicians once. Do it once a week and say, what have you done to get this available for me this week? And don't let up. It's their job to provide for you, but unless they continually hear from you, they're not going to do jack. They will only do things when they're forced to do it. So it's really up to everybody out there, not only to contact their politicians, both state and federal. But if there is a rally or if there is an event out there, support it. We need to see numbers out there. We can't have the same 70 people turn up at every event and expect change. We need everybody who needs this and everybody who knows someone who needs it to turn up at an event and have 5,000 or 10,000 people there showing that there is a need out there for them to do something about this. The biggest thing that we have found in the MCUA, and we've done several surveys and polls, is that affordability is the biggest thing that stops people from being able to have access. Peter Crock, who's the chairman of the Medical Cannabis Industry Association, said on ABC Radio lately that all medicinal cannabis is being imported. That's what's keeping the prices high, and people are taking the opportunity to make super profits along the way. The current system allows for middlemen to take their cut of the profit pie, and it's resulting in an example of bottles of oil that are being purchased in Canada for $90, and their exchange rate is very similar to ours. They're being resold here for over $360. Same bottle of oil. So there are a lot of people out there who are making a lot of money on people's illnesses. We've got one fellow, for instance, in North Queensland. He went through the application process. The first time he went through the application process, his doctor prescribed him high THC buds because he had kept himself seizure-free for 10 years just using smoked cannabis buds. When he went through the application process, his prescription was changed at Queensland Health level to a CBD product. So when he finally received his approval for a CBD product rather than what he needed, he said, you know, I can't use this. I'm going to start having seizures immediately if I use the product that they've prescribed for me. So he had to go back to the black market. Took him 18 months to negotiate that application process at that stage. So he went through the whole application process yet again. He finally got his legal prescription through the TGA for high THC smoked cannabis buds. He was prescribed 21 grams a day, and he's paying $740 an ounce. So if you add that up, that's $3,500 a week he would have to pay to have legal access. And none of us are in a position where we can afford that. I personally, I'm on a disability support pension. I can't even afford the consultation fees, let alone what they're asking for products. My cousin, he's just been prescribed, he's autistic, he's been prescribed smoked buds to keep his autism and his behavioural issues under control, and that's how he finds that it works best for him. $900 an ounce he's paying for a legal product. On the black or green market, whatever you want to call it, we're paying around about $250, $300 an ounce. So there are a lot of people out there who are making a lot of money, and that's just not right.
Hey, Des, can I just say something unofficially?
Yes.
You can get buds legally prescribed for about $400 an ounce, and look, if you just get 10 grams, a third of an ounce, and then you just keep topping up with street weed, and you get stopped by the police, it's all legal in this, well, unofficially, because you've got it in your legal cup. But there are advantages to supplementing with the legal.
I suppose there are ways that you can manipulate situations, but
I don't advise that, obviously, checking the laws of your country, but
yeah.
These are things that people do.
Anyway, we did a survey just recently. In fact, it's still going. So if anybody out there has a legal prescription, you've gone through the application process, please complete our survey, because we're trying to accrue the information associated with the people that are going through that. Of the 122 people who have already answered our survey, 23 of them are paying over $1,000 a month for their products. 57 of them are paying $500 a month. The cost factor, as I said, is the single biggest barrier. And of those surveyed, 89% said that they were very dissatisfied with the delivery system that's currently being used. And 50% of the people who are getting legal prescriptions are having to leave their products at the pharmacies because they're so expensive they can't afford to pick them up. Or if they do pick them up the first time, they can't afford to sustain that over a period of time. So something needs to change. They're also manipulating the data that's coming out. You know, like they're saying, oh, we've written 20,000 prescriptions. Of those 20,000 prescriptions, how many of them are repeat authorisations for the same patient? How many of them are for patients who have multiple products? I mean, myself, for instance, I would need 4 different products. So that would be 4 applications. And the first application, I believe, from speaking to the TGA, is only for 3 months. After the end of that 3 months, you're re-evaluated again. The doctor has to put in another application. So, you know, in a 1-year period, you could have 3 or 4, or in my case, a dozen applications, and yet they're going out there and going, we've written, you know, 20,000 prescriptions. Yeah, but how many patients does that equate to? Probably a quarter of what they're claiming. And when you've got 24 million people or whatever it is that we've got in this country, 4,000 people being prescribed in how many years is it? 4 years now? Is abysmal. Okay. So, sorry. What we're asking for at the present time is an independent review into the delivery system. Other activists have suggested that we have a political inquiry again, or some kind of review. Well, we've already been through no fewer than 7 of those at a state or federal level, and we're still in the same position we were before. In fact, it's worse because those of us who can qualify to get a prescription can't get access because of the price in most cases. Or in situations like myself, I'm a public hospital patient in Queensland. Public hospital doctors will not prescribe. So I've been trying for 5 years to get a legal prescription, and I still can't get a legal prescription. I can't afford to go through the cannabis access clinics because it's just out of my reach financially, the same as it is for anybody who would be on a support payment. What we're asking for is a review into that. We're asking to assess the overall delivery system of medical cannabis in Australia from an overall perspective, from a patient perspective, doctor, supplier and administrative. Another thing we've asked for is a review of access options in each state and territory, including authorised prescribers and special access clinics. A review of recent court cases and prosecutions regarding medical cannabis growers and users, along with cannabis drug driving charges. A review of types and strengths of medicine available in comparison to patient needs and the common delivery systems overseas. At the present time, overseas we all know that they have dispensaries where you can go in and you can choose the strain that suits you. That is the most beneficial way of being able to do it. You have people within those dispensaries who are aware of the different strains that they carry and can explain to the people. Over there you just get a doctor's recommendation, and you take that doctor's recommendation to the dispensary. Then someone experienced in cannabis strains and products can help you decide which is the best one to suit you. Here they're trying for a standardised pharmaceutical product which is going to be ineffective. You heard Debbie say before about isolates. Most of the products that are coming in at the moment are isolates. And you've also got to consider that many of these companies overseas have already had issues with contaminations, be it pesticides or things that they found out afterwards have contaminated the products that are being imported here to Australia for Australian consumers. We want a review of the costs of the Special Access Scheme imports, the cost of production, costs of the TGA and ODC permits and approvals, and limitations on ASX companies only, on an ASX companies only based system, which has so far increased the demands upon the black market and the green market. We want a review of doctors' views and available supporting science on the medical cannabis situation. Many of the peer-reviewed studies that are being done overseas are not being accepted here in Australia because they haven't been done in Australia. Now that's just ludicrous, and that's just an absolute waste and squandering of all of the research dollars that have been given to these researchers. I mean, the Lamberts, for instance, $33 million they donated, and they're one of many who have donated grant money for cannabis research. And from our perspective, it's being squandered. If you have a look overseas at the number of, Germany, for instance, did I see that since they became legalised, they've had 27,000 in less than a year? Of these prescriptions. We're 4 years into it and we haven't even reached that number. A review of patient testimonies and preferences of delivery and types of medicines. A review of legal options for lower cost and less restrictive delivery methods. For example, the TGA's complementary medicines pathway for herbal medicines is one of the things that we've suggested that they could possibly use. A review of self-supply laws for patients growing illegally, prosecutions for the need for legal exemption and non-seizure of medicines, because this is another problem. If the police come to your home, they will seize all of your medicines, and then like, for instance, our friends with the epilepsy or the children who are having seizures, if their medicine is taken away, what are they going to use? It's absolutely horrific that all of these people are having their medicines confiscated, including myself. They took 3 months' worth of mine. We want a review of the overall costs and liabilities of medical cannabis in Australia, and we want to develop a 10-year plan that's inclusive of patient needs and of all aspects of the cannabis delivery and consumption. We've had discussions placed as to possible ways this could be achieved. If herbal cannabis were correctly classified as a botanical medicine or herbal remedy, there would be no need to prove efficacy to the extent of pharmaceutical pathway demands. Now, we're not saying that we don't want a pharmaceutical product. What we're saying is the pie is big enough for everyone, and not everyone wants a product that they can go and buy from a shelf. I spoke to some people yesterday where I said, I've grown my own medicine, I've made my own medicine, and I've had medicine made from the same seed stock that has been grown by someone else elsewhere. And whether it be because it's been grown around the environment where I live and that has an interaction, or whether I put in more care or whatever, my own medicine from that same seed stock worked better for me than something that had been grown elsewhere. So this is something else that I'm sure in the future they will be able to link scientifically, but at the present time, it's not just that. I mean, think about, there are many of us out there who get a lot of healing effects from actually growing and making our own medicine and being able to see that we're improving our own health. Okay, so we've had discussions about ways that they can change the pathways, and I think that's something that they've got to consider. Leave the pharmaceutical products still on the S8 and the S4 schedule, but everything else, all the S9s, all of the homegrown, all of the boutique and the small operators, co-ops like the MCUA, we're a not-for-profit association, we could be helping to grow for all of our members. Things like that need to be incorporated into this. As a complementary medicine, you do not need the scientific papers from trials to support its efficacy. We already know that in its crudest form, it's less harmful than many chemical medications produced in the laboratories. If cannabis was to be delivered under the complementary pathway via the TGA, patients would have access to safe, effective, strain-specific whole plant Australian-grown products and buds at a fraction of the costs of the imported isolates. We mentioned the dispensaries and the overseas models. They're the ones that have worked best. Another way we could do it, one of the things that we suggested when we had the Queensland medical cannabis bill repealed, we'd actually given the Health Minister 5 recommendations, which would have given everyone in Queensland access, including homegrown, anyone who needed to home grow, if they'd have made those 5 changes. They made 2 of the changes. We now, in Queensland, any doctor can now prescribe, and non-cancer pain has been added as a treatable condition. But one of the things we suggested to them was take it out of the hands of Queensland Health. We believe because they're actually blocking not just myself, but lots of other people from being able to get a prescription through the public hospital system. What we recommended was take it out of the hands of Queensland Health, put it in the Justice Department. So you could go to your doctor, get a recommendation from him, go into the Justice Department, apply for a licence, which would give you like a normal little driver's licence, which would allow you to have a certain amount of product and a certain amount of plants, so that if the police did turn up at your door, you could say, no, sorry. Even if it costs us $50 or $100 a year, so that they're making something on that, I think that would be another way to open this up. They also need to consider financial hardship and perhaps have a realistic Medicare rebate to those who qualify as financially disadvantaged. Many people out there just can't afford to go through the legal system and are forced to break the law and do this illegally. We want them to regulate a price cap so that similar products from different companies have uniform pricing. There is no reason why one company can charge $300 a bottle for something and another company can charge $800 a bottle, for instance, for that same product. There has to be some kind of regulation and price cap to all of these products. A review would investigate some of these possibilities. It was suggested on Twitter recently that the Medical Cannabis Council, the AACMC, who reports to who are there under the ODC and the TGA, and they report to the Health Minister on all things to do with medical cannabis, that they may not be the best choice to undertake this review. Granted, the council members who initially were stacked with anti-cannabis proponents from their previous existences prior to cannabis becoming legal federally in 2015, they worked in the anti-cannabis area. But recently, many of those have changed. The balance has now changed. And of the new faces, one is conducting a clinical trial using vaporised herbal cannabis for palliative care. One is a nurse practitioner and policy advisor for a palliative care organisation. But yet again, there is still no patient representatives on that council. So they're really making decisions without knowing what, as patients or as patient groups, we really want. I've got to be honest, I'm tired of people out there misrepresenting what I need as a patient by someone who, yes, is an advocate but is not a patient herself. Yet I'm being dictated to as to what I should want. This is pushing a pharmaceutical product. I don't want a pharmaceutical product. They're not working for me. I've done the whole mainstream pharmaceutical. I know what works for me now. I know what's slowed down the progression of my disease, and it's a terminal disease. It's going to get worse, not better. So my biggest and most important thing at this stage is to slow it down. But, you know, I think there really needs to be some input from the patients themselves about what they want and what delivery methods they want, not just politicians sitting down in Canberra making decisions for us when they're totally uninformed. As I said, there have been no fewer than 7 politically weighted inquiries at both state and federal levels, and we do not feel it is in the patient's best interest to continue along this path that has delivered a broken system so far. We also believe that there should be a 3-year independent review of patient satisfaction, that this should also be included in the investigation, because the Council's role is to provide advice to the Minister of Health on issues relating to the medicinal use of cannabis and the implementation of the regulatory scheme under the Narcotics Act in 1967. So this is who we feel is best to do this independent review of what's going on in the delivery system. We don't think another political review is going to do anything other than undermine what we need further. We'd like to thank Senator Urquhart from Tasmania, who will be presenting our petition to Parliament with the voices of many patients, rather than the present case where it seems only one advocate who is not themselves a patient is pushing an agenda which is not a true representation of what patients need or want. If you've been through the legal application process, please do the survey. We have a not-for-profit association where that you can join through our website. If you go to MCUA of Australia on Facebook, that's where our 18,000 members are and where a lot of the information that we have. There's a search bar. You can search for any subject matter, any disease state, and peer-reviewed studies and information from other patients going through this will come up in a search. But thank you very much for listening to me waffle on today. But no, we do need help lobbying the government and these politicians and getting changes to the law. It's the only way we're going to be able to do it. And full legalisation I think is really the way to go. Thank you.
I want you to stay there.
Oh, stay there. Okay.
I reckon we get Deb to stay there, and Dr. Andrews here, and Malcolm outside. I'll bring him in, and we'll just do a bit of a last panel. Any questions? Any hard questions? You've learned so much now. Okay. Hello. Now ask him anything. Here's a chance. Here he goes. Anyone's got any gaps left? There's a mic here on the floor which is on, and that one's on.
Yes, please, love. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent.
You're off, are you?
There's mic on the floor. Grab the mic.
Mike's having the mic.
There's two
There's a mic on.
Lowest mic.
It's easier than having poles.
Is that working?
Yep, they're on. Anyway, I just thought, while these guys are here, it's hard to get everyone together. We only do this every few months. I think the next one is January the 18th and 19th or something. Tell your friends if it's been good. But I really appreciate everyone coming, and let's make the most of it. And any questions, or do you want to make a summary of anything? Anything you want to ask this wide variety of characters?
If you want to exercise, come on up. It's good for exercise. There you are.
I'd just like to say thank you so much. It's been really informative of every speaker here, and I've learnt so much, which is amazing. I think the hardest thing about getting patients, especially me personally, coming forward is the legalities. I don't want someone knocking at my door if I am public about it. So is there any tips that you could sort of give or advice to have a bit more of a voice in helping without disclosing yourself, if you understand what I mean?
Yeah, I do. So let me have a shot at that to start with, because Nimbin, we're waist deep in paranoia.
seriously, the street, there's so much people, you get, and I've got used to it. So it depends, where do you live? In New South Wales?
No, Queensland.
Queensland, so it's a fraction. So this is what I think from watching and hearing lots. If you are doing it just for yourself, it's personal and it's medical, you are really not going to get into much trouble. And I actually think most police join for good reasons and then find out they're caught up in a bloody drug war. And most of them smoked cones when they were at school. It's crazy and it frustrates them a lot, but they're trapped with mortgages. So I reckon, Andrew takes them on at every chance. I tend to be nice to the police if I'm in trouble. But I do think, don't worry too much and don't be greedy. It's only people who are making lots of money that I think they're very jealous of, that they're really after. And if it's medical, and it's all attitudes changing quickly now.
I think in Queensland, most people, the police aren't coming looking for you. No. Most people who are being arrested because they have their products or their plants have been found by accident. Either someone's dobbed them in, or a neighbour, or even a mowing man, next door has looked over the fence, seen the plant, or the police have come to the house on a completely different matter, like they did at my house, and just stumbled across my plants. They're not going out looking for you. They're not going to use facial recognition software if you go to a rally to find out who you are and where you live, so that they can come and get you. As long as you're discreet, and as Michael said, you're not making money hand over fist, they're going to leave you alone.
One thing, it's a fantastic plant to grow, and that it's so flexible. You can bend it down, you can train it in amongst the strawberries, you can totally lose it a fair bit. But the truth is, most people who do get busted, it's because a neighbour or someone dobbed them in, and the police have to act then.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Good question.
Yeah, another thing, if you're in Queensland, I don't know if you heard our earlier comments about the court case coming up on Friday, where we want the courts to recognise extraordinary emergency as it applies to medical cannabis. So be there. Like Mike said, they're not going to use facial recognition, right? Because the safest way to protect yourself is to change the law. Now, unfortunately, to use the analogy of the gays, right, they were locked in the closet being beaten by police until they stepped out, right? That thing, you've only got nothing to fear but fear itself. And stepping out is often your best production, but it doesn't suit everyone. Yeah, but what Michael said is fine. Get good neighbours and learn how to camouflage your plants. Yeah.
Bravery and education. Educate yourselves right as hard as you can, because when the police come and you've got plants in the back, they are not drugs. They are cannabis, they are a vegetable. You actually have to tell the police that you have to manufacture a drug out of this plant. You are not going to manufacture a drug out of this plant. This is your vegetable. That's the best way to go forward from now on. Bravery, okay, and education. Bravery, I live in a little village and I went around to everybody and I gave them seed, because everyone was growing, but they were hiding it from their next door neighbour. Now everybody in that village knows about who's growing what and how much and where, and we look after each other. All right? This is education and this is bravery. I don't know what else to say.
I got a question for Andrew. I can be there on Friday morning. Can you give any details of which court? And that's the one in George Street, is it?
The Supreme Court of Appeal in George Street, yeah. Yes, 9 o'clock.
So which court?
Oh, we'll see. Hopefully you'll just follow the crowd of people up to the court.
Okay.
Right, it better be.
The appeals court usually is court 3, but...
Yeah. It's really easy. Yeah, I won't say ask a policeman for directions, but you could try that.
It'll be up on the board as you go inside through the extra.
The Court of Appeal's not like the Magistrates' Court where there's thousands in the list. It's just one at a time.
What else? This Friday, next Friday, Brisbane.
What's the court case about?
Will I give a quick rave on that?
Yeah.
Okay. Last time I think it was last Mardi Gras, I asked that anyone who'd been arrested with an indictable quantity to consider... See, it's increasingly, if it's for medical, if you plead guilty with a medical explanation, the majority of people are getting very, very lenient treatment. Now, my friend Alex Dimitropoulos, who was the defendant in this case, they were so keen for him not to plead not guilty. They said, if you plead guilty, we'll even consider giving you a Section 10, right? But I suppose I pressed him and I said, I want you to plead not guilty on medical necessity because we need to run an extraordinary emergency case like we did in New South Wales. The first case is always the hardest, right? And he did, and the malignant shit, Judge Kent, unfortunately, the jury found him not guilty against the facts on 2 charges, but we were unable to properly inform the jury of their power to give a verdict against the facts. The appeal that we're running to the Court of Appeal is that a defendant be allowed to address the jury in clear and unequivocal terms that they have the power to do justice by following their conscience and actually going against the law. That's why this court case is so important, because if we get that appeal settled in our favour, the next defence will be easy. We just have to walk in and say to the jury, this happened in this case, this is what we'd like you to do in this case. Also, we need public there because it needs to be reported so people, prospective jury members, can hear about their right to nullify the law and give a verdict on conscience, right? I mean, I've been involved in dozens of court cases. I consider this one probably the most important because if we can kick this door open, right, we have a de facto end to the prohibition because the cops will stop busting medical growers once they lose 2 or 3 times. They're not completely stupid and they loathe losing, right? They're very competitive. They hate losing, basically. So this case is pivotal, right? It really is very, very important. It's the right to exercise the common law power of a jury to nullify statute law. If we don't succeed on Friday, we have an avenue to the High Court, and we feel that'll work in our favour. Hang on.
Can't hear. Can't hear.
Come up to the microphone, please, mate.
Hang on, come up to the microphone.
Would it extend to, I just want to ask if it's going to extend such a decision to beyond
Cannabis.
Absolutely.
That's why it's such an important court case. See, up until about the 1980s, there was debate in legal terms as whether a jury should be routinely informed of its ability to judge the law as well as the defendant. But then the judicial, what we call the judicial fascism sort of set in, and they started to impose the law over justice, right? Once we've established that the jury can judge a law, right, we can apply it to euthanasia, we can apply it to reproductive rights, we can apply it to all sorts of social issues that are currently bound up by unjust laws. Yeah, it's widely applicable. It'll be a crack in the monolithic sort of barriers that they're building up between the people and the justice system. Yeah.
So anybody who wants to get anybody to this court case, you've heard what Dr. Katelaris has said. Can we do the Facebook job? And I don't know anything about it, but most of you guys do. And if you don't, your children or your grandchildren will get everybody to that courtroom whenever it is. Friday. Okay, please. Thank you.
Can they get onto the Hemp Embassy and get the information if they're not?
It's on MCUA as well.
Yeah.
On the MCUA website.
No, on our Facebook group.
But if they're not members of that, how can they?
On the website or on your website, we could get it out everywhere.
What do they need to know?
Just to get to the courtroom Friday.
Get to George Street next Friday, 9 a.m. and tell your friends to go. So while we're talking about trying to change the law. One of the things I actually think is worth doing while in between these court cases is if you know a bit about medical cannabis and you're using it, or you've got a friend who's using it, make an appointment with your local member of parliament and go and talk to them. They kind of have to give you an appointment. And, you know, half an hour with them, you soon know if they're listening or not. And it is on the agenda in Canberra and in the capital cities now, state-wise. So I think, you know, they're kind of out of touch. They're not all out of touch, but it's another realm those politicians live in. They're busy, they've got a huge in tray, it's all plush carpets, they never get their boots dirty. I do think, you know, I found them very receptive. They listen, they hear it, they hear your story. It's going to come up for discussion in the next year in Parliament. So, if you know, you can be bothered, you go along, educate them, they're listening. It's a good thing to do.
When you go along to an appointment with your local representative, how great is the danger that could come back to bite you?
Oh, zero.
No. Yeah, no.
Zero. Listen, let me talk about that, mate.
Yeah.
Listen, I mean, it might sound strange, but I had to make a bit of an effort to get arrested. I mean, I'd made several provocative actions, but it took waving 10 kilos of pot at the TV camera to actually get myself. It's not that easy, all right, unless you've got a dobbing neighbour. That's unfortunate because they feel they have to act. But a few times, I mean, I tried to get myself arrested in times past. I said, look, I'm handing out seeds to 100 people. I'm a supplier. And he just sort of scowled and sort of swore at me and stamped off. Right? Don't worry, right? I mean, we're facing an ecological disaster and the real possibility of a nuclear war. Let's not worry about getting arrested.
That's it.
Right? We've got big problems to worry about.
I'm just worried that the cops would turn up and take all my medicine. That's
Yeah.
all I'm worried about.
Yeah, it's very unlikely.
If it happens, I'm sure that you just get in touch with a few people. We'll just contribute a little bit each and you'll be okay. Don't worry.
But I really think, you know, like, they're not going to come looking for you unless they've got a reason to come, whether it be someone jobs you in or whatever. Oh, sorry. Whatever. They're going to leave you alone. And to be perfectly honest, those of us who are out there in the media, we feel that we're more protected. You know, like, yes, I was arrested, but I wasn't arrested because they came looking for me. They just happened to stumble across my plants when they came to the house wanting to speak to someone else.
That's right. When I finally got taken back to my house by the detective, he said, Malcolm, he said, I've never had such a bloody interesting day in my whole... He said, now when your name comes to the top, as long as you're not a child molester, rob the bank or shoot the bloody president, he said, it goes straight to the bottom again. That's what he said.
He's a rare copper, I reckon.
Listen, I'll just a little anecdote. Way back when I was having disputes with the medical board, they claimed that I owed them $140,000 in legal fees, and they sent the sheriffs on to me, you know, with a letter, they're going to clean out your car and or take all your furniture and stuff like that. And I went to see the sheriff, the head sheriff at Hornsby, because I wasn't home, they just left a card, and I explained the situation. She looked at me, it was a female sheriff. She says, oh, you're treating my sister with breast cancer. Just like you said, he says, she tore up the thing and put in the bin. He says, you won't be hearing from us again. Right? So they're still waiting for their money. Right?
It's interesting, the questions worrying about getting busted, because it's really valid. So in New South Wales, you know, there's a cautioning for 15 grams or less, which is half an ounce, quite a bag. And unless you're super rude to the police or you've got a criminal record, they will just give you a caution. And they can do that twice, just a slip of paper. And if Deb's saying Queensland stopped doing that now, but it kind of symbolises the attitude that's happening now. They don't want to bust little personal, especially medical cannabis users. They're likely to get to court, the magistrate's going to bawl them out. Although every now and then, you know, you get a bad magistrate or someone who doesn't agree and whatever. But attitudes really have changed the last 5 years, I reckon. So don't be too worried. It's just going to cause you to use more weed. Anxiety.
What I want to do, this is my idea, and that is that we should get signs which you put out at your gate and put them all up the street called medical cannabis user. And just put them on your gate. Make sure all of your neighbours get one and start working on it. No one's going to come in and try and steal your medical cannabis. You just write down what it is. CBD doesn't get you stoned. Sorry, chaps, but whatever. So this is what I'd like to see, but it's an organised thing, and I can't organise a bloody dogfight, all right?
It's like a shut the gate. Everyone's got to shut the gate to CSG. If we ever put up medical cannabis user, we'd win. It's hard to get everyone doing something.
Yes.
Yeah, we're a star now, mate.
What else? Any other questions from the weekend? Anything at all? So you know that we can help you access medicine in Nimbin if you want, and there's a mail order, people doing mail order here, and that's been intercepted a few times in Queensland and in New South Wales. The police have usually gone to the person's door and say, we've intercepted a parcel, you're not going to get it, but no one has ever been charged.
Oh no, that's not true. We've got someone in Harvey Bay who was charged.
From medicine from here?
From here. From
America or something.
From the Australian Cannabis University. Some of their parcels were intercepted by the police, and I know of at least one person who lives in Harvey Bay who was charged with supplying herself because of those parcels going missing.
There you go, I'm wrong. But generally they're not out for you. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Supplying yourself.
Ask a question or Malcolm will sing a song. So.
It is a good... No, Will, I reckon the next song is going to be called Supplying Yourself, okay? No, we won't sing the song again. I'm finished with singing the song today.
The big thing, I've lived in Nimbin for 30 years and love pot, and it's a community full of people smoking pot. I think a lot of us were drawn here because it's a criminal thing. Like you go to Melbourne and all the Greeks live in one suburb and all the Iraqis here. So you go to like-minded people who are going to understand you and accept you. And being a criminal, which I've been pretty much most of my life, because I like pot, it's nice to hang out with fellow similar criminals. And well, you get understood, and our neighbours here don't dob you in, for example. And the big thing that I think I've learnt out of it all is it's so safe, cannabis. So the only thing you need to worry about is getting busted. It is so super safe and extraordinary that in a 10,000-year history of its use, there's not one recorded death. People have tried really hard to overdose in Nimbin and failed endlessly. Some of them gone to sleep for days on end, but they all wake up, So people need to be reassured by that. There's a lot of fear, We really have been lied to. And I'm not interested in blaming anyone. It goes back 100 years, really, and it was all about business. It's all about monopoly, Hemp was so good for so many things that banning it gave them control over the whole medical scene, the whole wood pulp scene, all sorts of things that came from hemp seed oil, the fibre thing, cotton's monopoly. So hemp in the next 50 years, it will just go everywhere, I think. And there's that old hippie saying, we've discovered a plant that can save the world. The only problem is it's illegal, is a little bit true. It sounds hippie madness. But, he's saying it's true. It's very true. It can do everything. So the reason they made it illegal was all about business. And to ban the opium poppy and the coca plant as well. They're the best pain relievers in nature, just out of the market. So those lies are getting exposed repeatedly. But I think it takes a few generations to convince people. Like the people I meet coming to Nimbin all the time, they're scared because there's a voice in the back of your head, probably from John Howard, it might send your kids crazy. And that marijuana psychosis story scared so many people.
Yeah, I'm an example.
It's very calculated, that whole thing. So, in the end, it forces people to trust themselves and think for themselves. That's good. It's good.
I have fairly clear evidence, despite what Michael said, that cannabis does cause psychosis. I've seen it time and time again. Every time I go to a politician's office and mentions cannabis, I get confronted with this complete idiot. It's really disturbing what's happened in Canberra and the sequel that followed that. Right? You've got Berejiklian saying, oh, it's a terrible thing to do. Oh, Canberra's gone sort of crazy or whatever. The Deputy Prime Minister said, oh, we'll have carnage on the roads. Right? They're just ignoring the reality of the sociological advantages of hemp legalisation. In Colorado, within 12 months of recreational legalisation, there was a reduction by 25% in suicides and a similar reduction in domestic violence and in fatal traffic accidents. Right? It didn't cut down the number of traffic accidents, but fatal traffic accidents. People weren't pissed to their eyeballs driving at 100 miles an hour. Right? But yeah, the psychosis cannabis connection is a very strong one. Right? Yeah.
It is like manure for your imagination pot. And there have been quite a few young kids who their first taste of cannabis is down a back lane mixed with tobacco, whack down them in a bong, and they freak out. But pretty much everyone recovers quickly. And I do think there's a point though, you know, everybody, if you're going to start cannabis the first time, you can start low, go slow, is a great motto, I think. And you do it in a safe place with people you trust and know. So it's why it's so creative. It's why Nimbin's so colourful.
And the thing is that in any population, there's 5% work too hard, 5% do nothing. What I have seen in my lifetime is that the boys, and mostly boys, a few girls, but mostly boys, get a joint when they're 15 and go, oh shit, that's beautiful, I'm going to sit here for 6 years. Okay, so they do that. They don't do anything. They don't do anything. They're useless buggers. And then when they get to 21 or 22, they go, oh shit, what am I doing? They get up and they start going. Now, I'll tell you this, if you were drinking alcohol or taking ice for 6 years, you're not taking a neuroprotectant, you're taking a neurotoxin. So what harm is it for those 5% who weren't going to do anything anyway to let them sit there and smoke all their bloody like? I don't care. Give it to them free, myself.
So I want to disagree with Malcolm. I reckon they're thinking. They might be a bit spaced out, but traditionally cannabis was given to people. One of the big things in India always, get them thinking. Sit down and work out your problem, go and get stoned, look at it from 20 different angles. So they were thinking. They were unfortunately, cannabis opened your eyes, and possibly at 15 that joint woke them up to what was going on. It took them 6 years to come to terms with it and re-enter life, you know.
No, I don't disagree with that either. No, you're right.
Here's Malcolm. You're going to talk about something. Here's a go.
Yes.
I'm a bit concerned about the use of cannabis and driving. Could you elaborate on that, Andrew? And what we could do or what to be careful of?
Yeah. It's been brought up, I think, by Michael on Saturday, that you can't rely on blood levels, for instance, the amount of cannabis on board as to what the impairment is.